Former Trump senior advisor Steve Bannon is in federal custody tonight, facing charges in an alleged fundraising scheme in support of the president's border wall. Bannon, along with 3 others, were indicted today for allegedly defrauding donors out of $25 million. Federal prosecutors say they claimed 100% of that money would be put towards building the wall, but that never happened. They say Bannon received more than $1 million through the nonprofit, part of which he used for personal expenses. The We Build the Wall campaign wasn't connected to President Trump, but had been promoted by several people close to him. While speaking to reporters at the White House today, the president maintained he knew nothing about this campaign.
I know nothing about the project other than I didn't like, when I read about it, I didn't like it. I said, this is for government, this isn't for private people. And it sounded to me like showboating. And I think it's a very sad thing for Mr. Bannon. I think it's surprising, but this was...
Joining me now with more is CBSN legal contributor Keir Dougall. Keir, good to have you with us again. So how serious are the charges against Steve Bannon, and what kind of punishment is he possibly facing?
So anytime you're charged with federal felonies, they're serious. And depending on the factors here, it could be something in the neighborhood, probably in a worst case, somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 years. If all the losses that are attributed to all of these participants are attributed also to him as a leader, it's probably going to be less than that, I would guess, at the end of the day. But I think the larger question here, with all the news, the potential news of legal issues for Mr. Bannon, is, how much trouble is he potentially in on several different fronts, and whether or not the president is simply going to cut him loose, or whether or not Mr. Bannon has some information that Mr. Trump doesn't want him to reveal. I think there's a little speculation there, but I think that would be the larger concern here overall.
Well, the Wall Street Journal reports a media company linked to Bannon and an exiled Chinese businessman is also being investigated by federal authorities. The yacht on which Bannon was arrested this morning happens to be owned by that same businessman. What do we know, Keir, about that investigation, and are there any potential connections?
Right. So the obvious connection, of course, is Mr. Bannon. What the Wall Street Journal is reporting is that he was working with this exiled Chinese businessman in a $300 million securities placement, which is now under investigation. If there was wrongdoing in connection with that, that's more exposure potentially for Mr. Bannon, and it'll lead to the question, just as this We Build the Wall potential swindle leads to, as to whether or not Mr. Bannon will try to cooperate. And if he potentially has other information about President Trump that investigators might be interested in.
Well, we also learned this week that the Senate Intelligence Committee referred Bannon last year to the Justice Department for possible prosecution for potentially lying to Congress in the Russia probe. Do we know, did law enforcement take any action on that?
We don't know. What the Los Angeles Times is reporting is that there was a referral relating to this pre-inauguration meeting between Eric Prince and the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund to potentially set up a back channel. That was what was being investigated. The LA Times is reporting that the Senate committee referred Mr. Bannon to the Justice Department for potential untruthfulness in testimony. This would be yet another avenue that could open up exposure and for Mr. Bannon, for which he might want to cooperate.
And finally, Keir, the president faced a legal defeat of his own today after a federal judge tossed out his second attempt at blocking New York prosecutors from obtaining his tax returns. Can the president appeal this decision? What happens next?
Yes, the president can appeal the dismissal of this complaint. He was alleging, after the Supreme Court sent the case back down and ordered it to go forward, he was further alleging that there was an undue burden and potentially an abuse by the district attorney's office The district judge dismissed those allegations. President Trump can now appeal, and we'll wait to see what happens.
All right, Keir Dougall for us. Keir, always good to have your analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine.